My father is looking at the board when I ask him. The board is a laminated sheet, 8.5 by 11. I printed it on the clinic's color printer and laminated it myself at the office supply store on Delmore Street, 3 months after the stroke. On one side, 37 symbols arranged in a 7 by 5 grid, common objects, emotions, actions, yes and no in the corners. On the other side, the alphabet, organized not alphabetically but by letter frequency in English, E, T, A across the top row, Z, and Q at the bottom. We modified the layout twice over 8 months. The current version is the third iteration. It looks like something a child made for a school project. It is, to my knowledge, the most important thing in this house. I take it out of the manila envelope in the second drawer of his bedside table. I sit in the chair beside the bed, close enough that he can see the board clearly without having to turn his head more than a few degrees. I hold it at the angle we have learned together, slightly tilted toward him. His eye level, his left side, because that is where his tracking is strongest. I say, "Dad, I need to ask you something." His eyes find mine. They are still his eyes, sharp, dark, the eyes of a man who spent 50 years inside books and who looked at you with the specific attention of someone who had been trained to notice things language could not contain. I say, "Theo and James have found a care facility. A good one. Private room. 20 minutes from here." I pause. "They want you to move there." His eyes go to the board. He knows what question is coming. I say, "Do you want to go?" The eye movement is small and controlled. Up and to the right. Then it shifts, down and to the left. Upright is our signal for yes. Down left is our signal for no. We established these over 4 weeks of trial and error, 8 months ago, in this same room, when I was still figuring out what he could do reliably, and he was still figuring out what I was building. He is looking at me. "That was no," I say. His eyes remain still. That is our confirmation. When I read him correctly, he stays still. When I am wrong, his eyes move again. He stays still. My brothers have already scheduled a tour of the facility for next Thursday. They have the power of attorney. Between the two of them, they have made every medical and financial decision for the past 8 months. They have done this with love and efficiency and the certainty of people who believe they understand the situation. They do not know about the board. They have not been in this room at the right time, on the right day, with the patience to sit for 45 minutes while my father and I work through something slowly and imprecisely and then, suddenly, clearly. They have not seen my father's eyes move to the symbol for music when the radio plays something he recognizes, or to know when Carmen tries to give him the wrong medication, or to the letterboard, one letter at a time, when he wants to say something the symbols cannot hold. Last week, he spelled 3 letters, H-O-M. I said, "Home." His eyes stayed still. "My name is Ruth Adiemi. I am 43 years old. I am a licensed speech-language pathologist with 14 years of clinical experience working specifically with adults who have lost language following neurological events. I assess what remains when speech is taken away. I build systems for people to communicate through what is left. I know, better than almost anyone in this city, what a person looks like when they are fully present and fully comprehending and fully unable to say so. My brothers would describe my work as helping people talk again. That is not incorrect. It is also not quite right. What I do is this. I find the language that remains inside someone after the visible language is gone. I learn what form it takes in that specific person, and then I build a bridge between that interior language and the world that has stopped listening because it can no longer hear. I have been doing this professionally for 14 years. I have been doing it for my father for 8 months. My brothers Theo, who manages investment portfolios in London, and James, who practices real estate law 12 minutes from this house, have decided that our father needs more care than can be provided at home. They have researched their options thoroughly. They have visited 2 facilities. They have spoken with his neurologist and with Carmen, his home care nurse. They have done all of this with the diligence and good intention of people who love someone and believe that love is best expressed through efficient action. They have not asked my father what he wants. Not because they don't care what he wants, because they believe he cannot tell them. I want to tell you what happened when I showed them they were wrong. I want to be clear, before I do. This is not a story about 2 villains and a hero. My brothers are not bad men. What they are is men who stopped looking closely enough at something that was hard to look at, and who had enough authority between them to make that insufficient looking consequential. What I want to ask you, before I tell you the rest, has anyone in your life ever made a decision about you while you were in the room? Not cruelly, not maliciously. but with the particular confidence of people who have already concluded that you cannot weigh in. And did anyone notice? My father was a man of language in the way that some people are men of the sea or men of God, not as a profession, or not only as a profession, but as a primary element. He was a professor of African literature for 31 years at the university downtown. He taught Achebe and Soyinka and Ngugi and Ama Ata Aidu and 100 writers his students had never encountered, and he taught them with the particular passion of someone who believes that what is not read is not preserved, and what is not preserved is eventually lost. He read in 4 languages. He spoke in all of them at different times of day, sometimes mid-sentence. He corrected grammar not pedantically, not cruelly, but reflexively. The way a musician corrects a flat note without breaking the conversation. He told stories at the dinner table that lasted 40 minutes and had 3 subplots and always ended at exactly the right moment. He narrated his own life as he was living it. I am going to the kitchen now. The kitchen smells of groundnut soup. This is the smell that means your grandmother is here. Language was not what he did. It was how he was present. The stroke happened on a Thursday morning in July, 18 months ago. He was at his desk. He had been working on a book, an analysis of translated West African literature, the 3rd chapter, which he had been writing and revising for 2 years. He was 60 minutes into the morning's work, which was his habit, when Carmen found him. The stroke was significant. Broca's area, in the left hemisphere, the region primarily responsible for speech production. The damage was not to his understanding. It was to his ability to turn what he understood into words. Expressive aphasia. He could hear everything. He could read. He could comprehend every conversation happening around him and about him with full intelligence. What he could not do was speak. The words existed inside him and arrived at the point of production and stopped there, and what came out, sometimes a syllable, sometimes a sound, sometimes a face that held the entire weight of an unspoken sentence, was not what he had sent. I was at the hospital within 2 hours of Carmen's call. I am the only one who lives in the same city. Theo was in London. James was in court. They arrived by that evening, both of them, and we stood in the hallway outside my father's room, and the neurologist explained what had happened and what to expect. Will he get his speech back? Theo asked. The neurologist said it depended on the extent of the damage, the rehabilitation, the time elapsed, and factors that were difficult to predict. Some patients recovered significant function. Others reached a plateau. It was early to say. What neither Theo nor James asked, and what I noted in the professional part of my brain that continued to function even in the crisis, was, what does he retain? What can he still do? They asked about what was lost. I was thinking about what was left. This is not a judgment. It is a description of 2 different ways of looking at the same situation. One way looks at the absence. One way looks at the remainder. Both are looking at the same person. The weeks that followed were difficult in ways that are hard to describe economically. My father had always filled every room he entered with his presence, not loudly, but completely. The silence he now inhabited was a different kind of silence than quiet. It was the silence of a stopped clock. Everything around it continued, and the stopped clock was still in the room, and the room had changed completely. Theo flew back to London after 3 weeks. He called every 2 days. He managed the finances and coordinated with the neurologist remotely and transferred money when it was needed. This was his form of presence, and it was real and necessary and not the form I needed. James visited on alternating Sundays. 45 minutes, sometimes an hour. He sat with our father and spoke to him, not the way you speak to someone who understands, but the way people often speak to someone they are uncertain about. Slightly louder than necessary, slightly simpler than the person requires, slightly past the point where a response might be expected. He left looking tired. I visited every week, sometimes twice. I brought plantain chips, the specific kind, thin and peppery, that my father used to make himself before the stroke, which you could only find at the West African grocery on Hollister Avenue, 40 minutes from my apartment. He could not eat the whole bag, but he liked having them. He liked that I brought them, and I started building the system. This is what I do professionally. I came to it not immediately, but after about 6 weeks, when I had spent enough time watching my father's eyes that I began to see the patterns I had been trained to recognize. When Carmen said something he disagreed with, his eyes moved in one direction. When I described something correctly, a memory, a fact, an interpretation, they moved in another. He was communicating. Not to anyone who was looking for it, but it was there. I brought a laminated board on a Tuesday morning in September. I showed it to him. I explained it slowly, directly, without the loudness or simplicity people default to, because he did not need either. I'm going to ask you things, I said. You don't have to answer. But if you want to, this is one way. He looked at the board for a long time. Then he looked at me. Then he looked at the corner where I had placed the symbol for yes. I said, "Is that yes?" His eyes moved. Up and to the right. That was the first day. The family meeting happened on a Saturday in March. Theo had flown in from London for the weekend. James drove over in the morning. They had coordinated in advance, which I knew, because Theo had texted me 2 days earlier. Saturday works for all of us. Dad's house, 2 p.m. We have some things to discuss regarding his care going forward. They had not asked if Saturday worked for me. They had stated that it worked for all of us. I arrived at 1:55. Carmen was not there. Saturdays were her off day. My father was in the living room in the chair by the window. He was wearing the dark green cardigan he had always worn for Sunday mornings, which now he wore whenever he was expecting company. He looked up when I came in. His eyes found mine. I said, quietly, close enough that my brothers couldn't hear from the kitchen, "I know." His eyes stayed still. The living room had not changed in 18 months. The bookshelves on both walls were still in the arrangement my father had established over 30 years, organized by his own logic, which I had never fully decoded. Not alphabetical, not chronological, not by subject, or not only by those things. There were clusters that made sense once you understood how he thought about the relationships between writers and traditions and arguments. I had spent 30 years in proximity to those shelves, and I could navigate them well enough to find something specific, but I could not have reproduced the logic from scratch. Now I thought, the shelves are another form of communication, another system that exists inside his mind and exists also in the physical world, available to anyone who learned how to read it. His books were organized by the shape of his thinking. His thinking was still there. I looked away from the shelves. My father was still watching me. I said, "I'll take care of it." His eyes went to the symbol board I was holding. I had already taken it out, already prepared. They went to yes. Theo and James came in from the kitchen carrying coffee. James set cups on the table. Theo sat across from my father in the armchair that had been my grandfather's, and that my father had kept for 30 years despite the wear on the left armrest. Theo is a careful person. He holds things at a distance while he assesses them. He held the coffee cup in both hands. "We've been looking at options," Theo said. He was speaking to all of us but was looking primarily at our father, in the too careful way he had developed over the past several months. Not unkind, just uncertain how much he was being understood. "There's a facility called Aldermore about 20 minutes from here. Private rooms, good staff. We visited last month." He paused. "It would mean more consistent care. Someone there overnight. Medical staff on site." James put down his coffee cup. "We think it's the right move," he said. "For safety. For continuity." I looked at my father. His face was still in the way it became when he was listening to something he had an opinion about, and had no way to express. I had learned to read that stillness. It was not absence. It was the specific quality of presence that has nowhere to go. "I'd like to hear the reasoning," I said. Theo explained. He was thorough. The home care coverage was limited to 3 days a week. The nights were unmonitored. Carmen was excellent, but there was no overnight backup. The neurologist had expressed concern about a second stroke event, and the response time if it happened at home. Aldermore had a specialized unit. Theo had researched the staff-to-patient ratios. He had spoken with the director. He had done all the right things. He had done them with genuine care. "I want to tell you something," I said. They both looked at me. "Dad can communicate." James frowned, not unkindly. "Ruth, not verbally, but reliably." I said it the way I would say it to a family in a clinical context. Precise, unhurried, expecting skepticism and prepared for it. "I've been working with him since September. We have a system, a communication board, combined with a consistent eye gaze protocol. It took about 3 months to establish reliable, yes, no responses. We've been expanding since then." Theo was quiet for a moment. "When you say reliable, I mean consistent across multiple sessions, across different days, across different contexts. I mean that he produces the same response to the same question across time. That's the clinical standard for reliability." James looked at our father. Then at me. "He hasn't," he stopped. "When I'm with him, he doesn't seem to—" "You're not asking him questions he can answer with the system," I said. "You're talking to him. That's different. He understands everything you say, but understanding and responding are 2 different pathways, and the responding pathway is what the stroke affected." I paused. "I can show you. I can set up a session and you can be there." Theo looked at James. James looked at the table. "If this is accurate," Theo said carefully, "it changes the conversation." "Yes," I said. "It does. My clinic is on the 4th floor of a building near the hospital." This was the following Tuesday. I had a full day of sessions. At 2 in the afternoon, I was with a patient named Hannah, 58, 9 months post-stroke, working on expanding her symbol vocabulary and beginning to practice letter-by-letter eye gaze for words the board couldn't hold. Hannah was a former pastry chef. Before the stroke, she had her own bakery. What she wanted to say most frequently, in our sessions, were names of things she was thinking about baking. Croissant, quinaman, patachoux. Words that required the letter board because the symbol grid had nothing for them. We were working on the letter C. She found it on the board. Her eyes moved to it, with the concentration of someone lifting something heavy. I said, C. She stayed still. C. I said again. What starts with C? Her eyes went to the symbol for kitchen. Then back to the letterboard. Then to R. Cier, I said. Croissant? Her face changed. That specific expression, it is not exactly a smile, but it is near a smile. The expression of someone who has just been understood. That expression is the reason I do this work. It is the most unremarkable looking thing in the room, and the most significant. We spent the next 20 minutes on the word. She wanted to know how to say it on the board in a way that was faster than spelling it every time. We worked out a shorthand, the C symbol, followed by the kitchen symbol, which in her private language meant something I used to make. This is how the system evolves. Not through standardization, but through the specific requirements of the specific person. Every board I have built is different. Every session teaches me something the textbooks did not. When the session ended, Hannah indicated the symbol I had placed at the bottom right of the board 6 weeks ago. More time next session? I said, yes. We'll do more next Tuesday. Her face did the near smile thing again. She sat in the good quality of having been understood in a room where she was not always understood, and I sat across from her in the good quality of having done the work I came here to do. After she left, I sat at my desk for a while. I was thinking about what Theo had said at the meeting. If this is accurate, it changes the conversation and about the specific way he had said it. Not dismissive, not convinced. The voice of a man who had organized his understanding of a situation and was being asked to admit that the organization might be wrong. I thought about the 8 months of Tuesdays and Thursdays and some Saturdays. The board going from 20 symbols to 37. My father spelling HOM across 3 separate sessions before I understood what he was building toward. The morning he used the board to tell me that Carmen had given him the wrong pill, not the medication, the wrong one in the sequence, a timing error, and I had been able to tell Carmen, and Carmen had been able to correct it. My brothers did not know about the pill incident. They did not know about a great many things. I had not told them because I had been waiting for the system to be stable enough, waiting for the right moment, waiting for the board to be something I could show, rather than just describe. And I had been doing something else too, which I did not fully admit to myself until later. I had been protecting the thing I had built, the private thing that existed between my father and me in that bedroom, from the moment it would enter the family conversation and be assessed and questioned and perhaps not believed. That was not wisdom. That was fear. That Thursday, I went to see my father. Carmen was there when I arrived. She was in the kitchen, organizing his medications for the week, and she looked up and said, "He had a good morning, ate most of his lunch." She said it the way she always did, efficient, affectionate, precise. Then she put on her coat and left. My father was at the kitchen table. He was sitting in the chair. He had always used the one on the left side, with the cracked plastic leg protector that had been cracked since 1987, when James dropped a box of books during a move. My father had never replaced the leg protector. Neither had anyone else. The crack had been there for 36 years, and the chair continued to function perfectly, and there was something in the persistence of that small flaw that I had always found comforting. Some things do not need to be fixed. They only need to be understood. I sat across from him with the bag of plantain chips. I opened the bag and put it on the table between us. He looked at it. Then he looked at me. "They've set a tour date," I said. "Next Thursday." He looked at the bag of chips. Then back at me. "I've asked Theo and James to come for a session before that," I said. "I want to show them the board. I want them to ask you directly." I paused. "Is that okay?" He looked at the board, which I had set on the table. His eyes went to the symbol for yes. Then he did something he had not done before in quite this way. He moved his eyes slowly, deliberately, from the yes symbol across the board, not randomly, but with direction until they rested on the letter grid. On the T, I watched him. Then, ha. Then, A. Then, Y. I said, "They?" His eyes stayed still. "You want them to come," I said. "You want them to hear this." He looked at me, still. I sat with that for a moment. I had been operating, for 8 months, with the assumption that the system was for him, for his safety, for his ability to communicate his needs to Carmen, for the medication incident, for the things he wanted to say when no one was sure he could say them. I had been building it as a tool for his care, but he was telling me that the tool was also, maybe primarily, for this. For the moment when his sons were in the room, he had been waiting too. We worked for another hour that afternoon. This is what the sessions look like, from the outside. Two people sitting across a kitchen table, one of them looking at a piece of laminated paper, while the other one watches and occasionally says a word or two. From the outside, it might look like very little is happening. From the inside, it is the most concentrated form of communication I know. Every eye movement is intentional. Every pause is information. The pace is determined by what he can sustain in a given session, some days 45 minutes, some days an hour and a half, depending on his fatigue, his clarity, the specific quality of his attention on that day. That afternoon, he wanted to talk about the book. He indicated it with his eyes looking from the kitchen toward the hallway where I knew he could see the corner of the study door. Then back at the board. Then to the letter B. The book, I said. Still, you want to work on it? His eyes went to the symbol I'd added 3 months ago, on a piece of paper taped to the margin of the board. Not yet. He had asked for that symbol specifically. We had spent a session establishing what he meant, and what he meant was, not the action, but the state. The awareness of something that was waiting. Not yet. You're thinking about it, I said. Still. Is there something specific you're thinking about? For the book? He went to the letter grid. It took 7 minutes to complete the sequence, because he stopped twice when he lost the specific tracking precision he needed. The letters arrived one at a time. C, H, A, P, T, E, R. Chapter, I said. Still. The chapter you were working on? He moved to the symbol for yes. Then, after a moment, to more. More than that chapter, I said. Still. I looked at him. He was watching me with the specific patience of someone who has learned that the thing they want to say will arrive if they give it enough time. The whole book, I said. His eyes went up and to the right. Yes. He was still thinking about the whole book, 18 months after the stroke, with the manuscript sitting in the study on the page where he had left off, with the cursor blinking on the sentence with the comma, and the space he was still inside it. He had not put it down. I wrote in my notebook. April 3. He is still working on the book. Not on paper. Somewhere. I did not say this to Theo and James when I asked them to come on Saturday. I was not ready to try to explain it. Some things require the right moment, and the right audience, and the right conditions, and the right conditions for that particular thing had not yet arrived. I thought about it on the drive home, though. About what it means to be inside a long work of thought, a book, an argument, an idea that has been developing for years, and then to have the specific instrument of its expression taken away, while the thought itself continues, while the chapters build and shift inside you, without any way out. My father had spent 50 years in language. And now the language was in him, complete and alive, and unable to cross the specific bridge that would make it available to anyone else. What I was building, week by week, Thursday by Thursday, was not that bridge. It was a smaller thing, a way to signal the existence of the bridge, a way to say, I am still here. The thought is still happening. Ask me. I was still learning how small things can be before they stop being enough. Theo agreed to come on Saturday morning. James took longer. He called me on Friday evening. His voice had the careful quality it gets when he is saying something he has rehearsed. I want to be supportive, he said, of the work you've been doing with him. I want to be clear about that. But, I said, I've read about AAC approaches, he said. I know they can be effective with certain patients. I also know that in family contexts, there can be, he paused, there can be unconscious prompting. The person facilitating wants a certain response. And they, James, I said, I'm not saying you're doing that intentionally. James, come Saturday. You don't have to take my word for anything. Come and watch. Ask your own questions. A silence. If it goes the way you're describing, he said, then yes, it changes things. If it goes the way I'm describing, I said, then we do what Dad wants. He was quiet for a moment. Then, Saturday at 10, I said yes. I thanked him. I hung up and sat in my apartment and looked at the board, which I had brought home to review the symbol placement one more time. 37 symbols. The letter grid, 2.5 years of his remaining language, built symbol by symbol, Thursday morning, by Thursday morning. I thought, I should have shown them months ago. Then I thought, he wanted to be the one to show them. I was not sure which of those was true. Perhaps both. I did not sleep well that night. This is not something I would normally include in a story about my father, because it feels like making the story about me when it is not about me, but it is honest, and honesty seems more important here than the appearance of steadiness. I lay in bed and thought about the Saturday morning session in terms of what I could control and what I could not. What I could control: the position of the board, the angle, the distance, the way I would frame the questions: neutral, non-leading, the clinical standard, the pace, the confirmation protocol. What I could not control: whether James would believe what he saw, whether Theo would read the responses accurately, or overread them, whether my father would have the clarity and the focus he had on good days, rather than the fog that sometimes settled in without explanation. I thought about the medication incident from December. My father had indicated, through the board, that Carmen had given him the wrong pill in the sequence. Not the wrong medication, the wrong one in the order of his morning routine, which he knew by the color and the order of the dispenser boxes, and which Carmen had shuffled accidentally. He had communicated this to me in 40 minutes of slow, imprecise iteration. I had decoded it and told Carmen, and Carmen had corrected it and checked the rest of the dispenser. My brothers did not know this happened. I had not told them because it had felt, at the time, like clinical information, a data point about the system's usefulness, not a story to tell at dinner. But lying awake the night before, I thought, I should have told them in December. That one incident, communicated clearly, might have changed the entire conversation we had just had in the kitchen. It would have been concrete. It would have been about medication safety, which is language both of them understand. I had been managing information about my father's inner life the same way the filing system on Nadia's father's desk managed information. Present but not organized for access. Available to anyone who knew where to look, which was no one except me. At 2 in the morning, I got up and made tea. I sat at my kitchen table and I thought about my father spelling chapter, about the book that was still happening inside him, about the chapter he had not been able to finish. I wrote in my notebook, "He is not waiting to be rescued, he is waiting to be heard." There is a difference and it matters, and Saturday is not about proving that I was right. It is about creating the conditions for him to be in the room as himself. I read that back. Then I added, "Try to remember that while you're sitting there." I went back to bed at 3. I slept for 4 hours. In the morning, I made coffee and packed the board in its manila envelope and drove to my father's house. The kitchen smelled of the groundnut soup Carmen had made the day before and left in the refrigerator. That smell, in that house, in the particular quality of March morning light, I had known it my whole life. I stood in the kitchen for a moment before my father came in from the hallway, moving carefully with the walker he had been using for 3 months. And I noticed the chair with the cracked leg protector, and the empty fruit bowl on the counter, and the coat hook by the door, with its accumulation of jackets, and the window above the sink, that caught the morning light at an angle that made the glass glow. He came in and saw me, and his face did the thing it does. I said, "Good morning." He made his way to his chair, the one on the left. He settled into it with the patience of someone who has learned to take the time that each thing requires. I set the board on the table. We did a short session before Theo and James arrived, not about Saturday, not about the facility, just the morning routine. What he wanted for breakfast, whether he had slept, whether the medication had been on time. It took about 20 minutes. It was the same 20 minutes we had had every Thursday for 8 months, and I wanted him to have that normal ground under him before the day changed. When he indicated that breakfast had been good and that he had slept and that the medication had been on time, I said, "They're coming at 10. His eyes went to the symbol for yes. "Are you ready?" He looked at me for a moment, then his eyes went, slowly, to the letter grid. E. M. I said, I waited. His eyes found the next letter. A. Then, LWAYS. "I'm always," I said. He stayed still. "I'm always ready," I said. His eyes did not move to yes. They stayed on me. I understood. That was not quite what he meant. He meant something more like, "I have been ready. I have been waiting. This is not new for me." But the board did not have a symbol for that, and we did not have time to build to it, and so he left the sentence at, "I'm always," and looked at me, and I read the rest of it in his face. The doorbell rang at 10:03. Saturday morning, my father's house. 10 o'clock. The kitchen was cold, the way old houses are cold in March, not draft cold but deep cold, the cold of walls that have been absorbing winter for months. I had arrived first and turned the heat up and made coffee. My father was in his chair, the one with the cracked leg protector. He was wearing the green cardigan again. Theo arrived at 10:04. He came in the back way, through the kitchen door. the way we all do because the front door lock has been stiff since 2004 and our father never replaced it. He was carrying a paper cup of coffee from the place on the corner, and he stopped when he saw my father and said, quietly, "Morning, Dad." My father looked at him. His face did the thing it does when someone he loves comes into the room, not expressiveness, not demonstration, but a specific stillness that is, I have come to understand, its own form of warmth. James arrived at 10:12. He hung his coat on the hook by the door, the hook that has held every coat that has entered this house since 1989. He sat in the chair across from my father. He did not look at me. I set the board on the table. "I want to walk you through how this works," I said. I said it the way I say it to families in the clinical setting, not assuming they will accept it, not apologizing for presenting it, just stating what is about to happen. We have two consistent eye gaze responses. Up and to the right means yes. Down and to the left means no. "Dad, can you show Theo and James?" My father looked at Theo. His eyes moved up and to the right, then down and to the left. Theo watched. His hands were around the paper cup. He was very still. "He just showed you yes and then no," I said. "Now, the board." I positioned it at the angle we used. "Dad, can you show me something you want today?" He looked at the board. His eyes moved across the symbol grid slowly, with the deliberateness that I recognized as his maximum precision until they reached the symbol for window. "Window," I said. "You want the window open?" He looked at me. "Still." "Yes." I got up and opened the window above the sink. March air came in, cold and specific, the particular cold of early spring, the smell of thaw underneath the last of winter. My father's eyes went to the symbol for good. James made a sound. It was not a word. It was the sound of something reorganizing. "Okay," Theo said. His voice was different than it had been. Not uncertain, quieter. "Okay, I understand the mechanism." He paused. Can I ask him something?" "Yes," I said. "Use simple questions. Yes or no. Watch his eyes. Don't guess until you're sure. If you're not sure, ask me." Theo set down the coffee cup. He leaned forward slightly. He looked at our father the way I had not seen him look at our father in 8 months, not carefully, not from a managed distance, but directly, like looking at a person. "Dad," he said, "do you know what we've been discussing? About Aldermore?" My father's eyes went up and to the right. "Yes." "Do you want Theo stopped?" He looked at me. "Ask him directly," I said. "He can handle the question." Theo turned back. "Do you want to go there? To the facility?" The room was completely silent. My father's eyes went down and to the left. No, Theo said. He said it almost to himself. James was looking at the table. He had not spoken since he sat down. Now he said, without looking up, "Ask him why." "The board doesn't have why yet," I said. "We can work toward it. But what he has just told you is the answer to the question you needed to ask him." James looked up. His face had the expression of someone who has been building a structure for a long time and has just discovered that one of the foundational measurements was wrong, not collapsed, revised. "How long?" he said. "Has this been here?" 8 months, I said. 8 months. He said the number the way you repeat something you are placing correctly. "And you've been coming every week, sometimes twice." He was quiet. Theo said, "To our father." "I didn't know you could." He stopped. He tried again. "I thought you couldn't." He stopped again. He had run up against the edge of what language could do. My father looked at him. His eyes went to the board. Slowly, carefully, with the precision of someone doing something for the first time in front of an audience, his eyes moved to the letter grid. E, then T, then S. Then he stopped. He looked at me. "ITS," I said. "It's?" He stayed still. His eyes moved again. To the letter O. Then K. He stopped. His eyes went to the yes symbol. "It's okay," I said. He stayed still. Theo made a sound. It was the sound a person makes when they have been trying very hard not to cry in a room where they are not sure crying is appropriate. He looked at the ceiling for a moment. Then he put his hand on the table. Near our father's hand, not touching, just near. James said nothing for a long time. He was looking at the board. Then at our father. Then at the window I had opened, where the March air was still moving the edge of the curtain. "Dad," he said finally. "I'm sorry." My father looked at him. His eyes did not move to the symbol for yes or no. They stayed on James's face. Some things do not require a translation. Theo picked up the board. He held it the way you hold something you do not entirely understand. He looked at it for a moment. Then he pointed, tentatively, to the symbol for question. He looked at our father. Is it okay if I try?" My father's eyes went up and to the right. Theo pointed to the symbol for window. "Window?" He said it carefully, watching our father's face. My father's eyes went to the yes symbol. Then, and this had never happened in exactly this way before, his eyes moved to the symbol I had labeled again. Slowly, deliberately. Window! Again. You want the window open more? Theo said. My father stayed still. Theo got up and opened the window further. The morning air moved through the kitchen more fully now, cold and clean and alive with the smell of things beginning. My father looked at the open window. His eyes went to the symbol for good. Theo sat back down. He had the board in his hands. He was looking at it with the expression of someone who has just realized that what they are holding is more than what they thought it was. James was writing something in his phone. I watched him for a moment. He was taking notes. Not for a legal purpose. Just to remember, here is what changed, and what did not. Theo extended his stay by 4 days. He did not move our father to Aldermore. He called the facility and explained that the family situation had evolved, and that they were reconsidering the timeline. The facility was understanding. They were used to families that reconsidered. The home care coverage was increased. Theo arranged for overnight monitoring 3 days a week. Through a home health service he found that specialized in neurological care. It cost more than the facility would have. He paid the difference without discussion. James came back the following Wednesday. He stayed for 2 hours. He brought the communication board. I had made him a copy, and he sat with our father at the kitchen table, and they worked through it together. Slowly, imperfectly, with the particular clumsiness of someone doing a new skill for the first time. He got the responses wrong twice. The third time, he understood. He called me that night. He said, I didn't know. I said, I know. He said, you should have told us sooner. I thought about what to say to that. I thought about the 8 months of Tuesdays and Thursdays, about waiting for the system to be stable, about protecting the private thing, about my father spelling THEY and waiting for the right moment. You're right, I said. And then, but I needed to know it worked before I could show it to you, and you needed to be ready to see it. I paused. I'm not sure which of those came first. He was quiet. Then, both probably. James is not the kind of person who apologizes easily. What he said next was the closest he would come. I'm going to learn how to use it properly. I said that would be good. I want to be honest about something. I waited too long. I built the system over 8 months, and I visited every week, and I knew what I had. And I told myself I was waiting for the right moment, and for the system to be stable, and for the evidence to be clear, and all of that was true. But I was also, beneath all of that, afraid. Afraid that my brothers would look at the board and look at my father and say, this is interpretation, not communication. Afraid that the thing I had built would be dismissed as a daughter's wishful thinking, dressed up in professional language. I had spent 14 years building the credibility that should have protected me from that fear, and I was still afraid. That fear cost my father months in which he could have been communicating with Theo and James. Months in which they could have been sitting across from him with the board instead of talking at him and past him and about him in a room where he understood every word. I do not say this to punish myself. I say it because the story would be dishonest without it. There is also something I want to say about what I do, about what speech-language pathology is, when it is done for someone you love. In the clinical context, it is a professional service. I see the patient for 50 minutes twice a week. I document the sessions. I hand the family a communication board, and I train them in its use, and I discharge the patient when the goals are met, or when the plateau is reached. I am competent, and I care, and I go home. What I built with my father was not that. It was not the clinical version of what I do. It was the version built by someone who has a reason to keep going past the plateau, who brings the same bag of plantain chips every week and sits in the same chair and asks the same question differently until the answer comes through in a form that was not there the week before. The question I have been thinking about since the Saturday morning session is this. What is the difference between translating for someone and restoring their ability to speak for themselves? In the room that Saturday, I did not speak for my father. I set up the conditions in which he could speak. That is a meaningful distinction. But it is also a narrow one. I was the one who decided when to set up those conditions, and with whom, and what questions to ask. He could not have arranged that morning without me. So whose voice was it, finally? I think the answer is his. But the hearing of it was mine to make possible. And making it possible required me to be in that room, with that board, every week, for 8 months, which required me to be a particular kind of person who shows up when there is no audience and no reward, and no certainty that anything is being built. I do not know what name to give that. But I know it is different from what my brothers did. And I know it is not better. In every dimension Theo kept the finances from falling apart. James made the phone calls. These things mattered. What I know is that all three of us loved our father. And only one of us was in the room enough to hear him. 3 months later, my father is still in his house. Theo flies in from London every 6 weeks instead of every 3 months. He has been talking about a longer visit a month, maybe 2 that he has not yet scheduled, but mentions in a way that sounds increasingly like a decision rather than a hypothetical. He has not moved back to the US, and he has not stayed. He is somewhere between those two things, which is, perhaps, where he needs to be. On the kitchen table, beside the fruit bowl and the bottle of his morning medications, there is a yellow legal pad. Theo started it during his extended stay. It is a log of their sessions with the board dates, questions asked, responses received, notes on what worked and what didn't. The handwriting changes between entries. Theo's careful print, James's faster script, Carmen's round letters when she has a question she wants to ask and thinks to write it down first. My father's voice, assembled from eye movements and laminated symbols, filling up a legal pad. James comes on Wednesdays now, not 45 minutes longer. He is not yet fluent with the board. He gets the responses wrong sometimes, and has to ask me or look at the notes. But he comes, and he sits in the chair across from our father, not his grandfather's chair, but the one on the right side, closest to the window, and he tries. Last week, he brought a chessboard. He set it up on the table and he explained the pieces to our father using the communication board, pointing to each piece, asking yes, no, adjusting. It took 40 minutes to establish whether our father wanted to play. He did not want to play, but he wanted to watch James explain it. His eyes went to the symbol for again 3 times while James was talking about the knight. James noticed. He looked up. His eyes went uncertain for a moment. Then he started explaining the knight's movement again, slightly differently, watching our father's face. I know this happened because James texted me that night. I think he likes the knight. Not sure why. Going back Friday. There is something I have been thinking about in the 3 months since the Saturday session. I have been thinking about all the conversations that happened in my father's kitchen and living room and bedroom over the past 18 months, while he understood every word and had no way to respond. The family meetings about the facility. The phone calls between Theo and James conducted with him in the next room. The times Carmen summarized his day to whichever of us called he had a good morning. He ate most of his lunch while he sat nearby, listening, having had a morning that contained considerably more than good or not good, which are the only categories the summary allowed for. He heard all of it. He understood all of it. He had opinions about all of it. He had been in that house, in that silence, for 18 months. I do not let myself dwell on this too long. It is not useful. What is useful is the Wednesday visits and the legal pad and the session I am planning to do next month, where I will try to establish a symbol for more complex than yes or no, which I have been wanting to add for a while and which I think he is ready for. The book on my father's desk has not moved. The manuscript he was writing when the stroke happened, the 3rd chapter, mid-revision. The cursor still blinking on a sentence that ends with a comma and a space. I did not know whether to close the document. I asked him last month, using the board. He indicated no. Leave it open. I go to the house on Sunday mornings. I bring the plantain chips. I sit in the chair across from my father, the one on the left, not the chair with the cracked leg protector. That chair is his. Has always been his. I sit across from him, and I take out the board, and we begin. Last Sunday, he spelled something I had not seen him try to spell before. It took 11 minutes. He ran out of focus halfway through the second word, and we had to rest and come back. When it was complete, I read it aloud. 2 words. A title, or the beginning of one. The translation. He stayed still when I read it. I said, "Is that for the book?" His eyes went up and to the right. Yes. I wrote it on a piece of paper and set it on the desk, at the top of the manuscript page, above the sentence with the comma and the space. The cracked leg protector is still on the chair. It will probably still be there in 36 more years. Some things do not need to be fixed. They only need to be present in the right room, noticed by the right person, kept by someone who understands that not everything broken requires replacing. What my father needed was not for someone to speak for him. He needed someone to make it possible for him to be heard. I have been trying to do that. I am still learning how. The board is on the kitchen table when I leave. Theo has a copy. James has a copy. Carmen uses hers on Mondays. My father's voice is in 3 places now. That is not everything. It is not nothing.